Some of my claim to 1,000 plus subscribers came from my Jackass related videos, which it's time to finally address the elephant in the room. Why are they missing? Why are they private? Whatever. Well, the thing is, YouTube, or rather its automated systems, have determined that my first few videos in that series violated the community rules or whatever by showing dangerous activity. Parts 1, 3, 4, and 5 in the Haggard review all got hit with an 18+, and Part 2 was pulled entirely and deleted and is now lost forever. So it is with regret that I hereby announce that Child of the Jackass generation will be shelved indefinitely. Fortunately, I didn't get like a big strike or anything. I'm just kind of on like a probationary status until February, but at this point in time, I feel it is not in the best interest of my channel to continue on with the series because there's just such a gray area what's considered dangerous activity and what's not. At some point I'll probably get to Wild Boys. I think I can get away with that one, and I kind of wanted to do a ballad of Steve-O and a ballad of Bam Margera down the road, but I think until then I'm just going to take a break from Jackass entirely and focus on other things. However, I did make a commitment to look at the 2 other feature-length Bam Margera projects when I did my Haggard video, and I figured I could give you guys at least that. So without further ado, let's get to the second Bam Margera feature, Bam Margera's Where the Fuck is Santa? Now it's a little confusing because I'm doing these in order, but I'm doing them in order of release date, not production date, and I understand that Where the Fuck is Santa was actually shot after Ming Hags, but it was released first, so I'll be jumping a bit forward and backwards during the course of the review when it comes to like timelines and shit. Where the Fuck is Santa is different from Bam's other releases as it was released by Warner Home Video rather than by MTV or independently. This is about 2 years after Jackass number 2 came out and about 3 years after Viva La Bam concluded and about 1 year after Bams Unholy Union. Initially, Bams Unholy Union was to be part of my Viva La spin-offs video, but I feel I should just briefly go over it here because, trust me, I did not get a lot of material out of Where the Fuck is Santa. Bams Unholy Union was a show that aired on MTV as the network changed its key demo from teenagers in general, but with a focus on the male demographic, to going for teenage girls, much like that 27-year-old who bought us beer in high school. A lot of shows like My Super Sweet 16, Life of Ryan, and The Hills were airing immediately after the Jackass generation concluded, which is ironic because it was just such a very short-lived fad that also killed the previous thing that was big on MTV, which was MTV Animation, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Although I already kind of got to it when I did my Teletoon Unleashed review with undergrads, but anyway. The fact is, the network was flooded with shows that were aimed at the 12 to 18-year-old female demographic, so naturally they figured, well, kids don't want to see you doing hijinks so much anymore. They're into the slice of life crap. So Bam and his childhood friend Missy Rothstein, who'd been dating at the time, decided to do a reality show following the days leading up to their marriage. Bam's Unholy Union came out roughly a year after the Viva La Bam spring break special and after the whole Don Vito incident. If you can recall, initially after Viva La Bam aired, they were supposed to have periodic specials that aired on MTV. The spring break was the only one that they made, but there was probably supposed to be like a Christmas one, a Thanksgiving one, a 4th of July one, etc. But for whatever reason, all that fell apart, and then all we got was Unholy Union, which was a limited series that ran for 1 season. I remember when I was a kid, I heard Bam was getting a new show, and I was pretty excited. I legit thought like Viva La Bam was coming back, or it was supposed to be kind of like a Viva La Bam thing, but Bam's Unholy Union was a very neutered Viva La Bam. It had some of the stuff that you'd see in Viva La Bam, but it was aimed at a completely different demographic. Now, if I recall correctly, girls did like Jackass to some degree. I do recall a few girls that I knew back in the day that absolutely loved this shit, but what they absolutely loved was Bam Margera. They thought he was cute. They thought he was funny, and he had that rebel bad boy thing going. The problem was, they liked Bam in like 2002, 2003. This was 2007 Bam. His body was starting to go, the substance abuse was starting to get like out of control, and the whole format of the show just failed to connect with anybody. I didn't hear anybody talking about this. People forget that this even existed, because putting Bam Margera on something is going to attract the demographic of teenage boys, but the demographic of teenage boys does not give a shit about like slice of life romance reality shows. It was kind of a double-edged sword against MTV, because as a whole, Bam's Unholy Union didn't do a good job of hooking the teenage girl demographic in, and it isolated the fans of Bam and Jackass. And then to add on top of that, knowing now where Bam and Missy's marriage went, it's just kind of sad to watch that he just dragged this poor woman into this reality show in hopes of like reigniting kickstarting his TV career, and then, It's also sad to watch because it was the second to last time Bam did anything with the CKY crew, and they were barely in it. Rab had long since left the group, Dunn was only featured as a guest, and DiCamillo and Rake showed up, but shortly after, they both start up associating with Bam much like Rab did. Effectively, the last two pieces of media to feature the CKY crew were Bams Unholy Union and Ming Hags. Now, I am going to get to Ming Hags at a later date, but I do kind of have to bring it up here to contextualize Where the Fuck is Santa. So, Ming Hags was a movie that was shot in 2007 but would not see a release until 2009, while Where the Fuck is Santa was released in 2008 and was presumably shot in the winter of 2007 after Ming Hags wrapped. As a result, none of the original CKY crew really appear in Where the Fuck is Santa besides Jess Margera, and the rest of it feels like a bootleg Viva La Bam with a bootleg CKY crew in it. The quote-unquote new CKY crew consists of Bam, Brandon Novak, Jess Margera, Chad Ginsburg, Joe Franz, and Mark Hanna, and this guy who's in it. And to kind of alleviate the lack of Don Vito, they bring in a new kind of weird, out-of-touch person with Ralph the Bagger. From the Whack Pack, which is weird because Ralph the Bagger is genuinely mentally challenged, and they give him a whole little side plot where he's with Jimmy Pop trying to score or whatever. So he's playing the role of Don Vito, but his mentally challenged nature makes him seem more like Chris Rab's character in Haggard. It's very confusing. And we also get Bam's Uncle Matt and a special appearance by two of the dudes in. The fact is, people liked the CKY crew almost as much as they liked Bam. In CKY, they were pretty much more or less featured on the same level as Bam, but then as Viva La Bam kind of started, like they kind of fell into the background. Some of them even became more like his lackeys than actual characters. As Viva La Bam was basically just showing how great Bam Margera's life was. Like honestly, just look at the credits to Viva La Bam. They're not credited as the CKY crew, they're credited as Bam's crew. And throughout Viva La Bam, there's a lot of effort put into showing how Bam's friends are kind of freeloaders, they're always crashing at his house, and kind of just his entourage that rides his coattails. And I can't imagine that any of these guys were thrilled about this depiction, but they did it for the paychecks. And without the element of like DiCamillo, Rake, Rab, Dunn, all you really have here is just a crappy movie with Bam acting all big. I can see why this went straight to home video. And going back to my earlier paragraph about the Viva La Bam specials, it seems like this was an attempt to do a Viva La Bam special. Like the whole thing is basically shot like an episode of Viva La Bam, but it has nobody from Viva La Bam in it. Like Phil and April kind of show up, but everyone else is just not a Viva La Bam crew member. It's just like people who are like background guys in the CKY videos in some episodes of Viva La Bam. If I had to guess, Bam shot this, presented it to MTV, and was like, "Oh, let's do a Viva La Bam special." And MTV watched it, and they were like, "No, we're gonna pass on this. This isn't really what we're looking for." As a result, Bam ended up getting it released through Warner. And there's a weird correlation here. Initially, Bam was developing his sequel to Haggard titled Kiss a Good Man's Ass, and early negotiations for the project were with Warner Bros. In around 2004-2005, right at the end of Bam's peak of popularity. Eventually, negotiations fell apart, and Kiss a Good Man's Ass would be shelved and repurposed into Ming Hags. More on this when I review Ming Hags, but I believe that Where the Fuck is Santa was some sort of compromise to that whole situation. Like, Warner was like, well, we wanted a Bam project to release, so we can just like do this Christmas thing. And if it does well, we'll bring you back for more. I would go ahead and say 2008 was pretty much when Bam, like, his popularity just like, nobody wanted to touch him or the Jackass shit in general with a 20-foot pole. It was just dead, it was done, it was finished, nobody wanted to see that shit no more.
You're done. You're washed. It's over.
So this whole big project, no matter how much effort Bam may have put into it, just ended up getting dumped on home video for the Christmas season and forgotten about. This whole video is actually very depressing, but not because Bam's clearly starting to fall worse into substance abuse at this point. It's sort of an end of the Wild West type thing. Not in its narrative, but metaphorically, what you are watching when you watch Where the Fuck is Santa is a piece of media within a media franchise that just screams, it's over. The basic premise is, like I said, it's shot like a Viva La Bam episode, and Bam wants to get Missy a Christmas Christmas present, but doesn't know what to give her because he's loaded and has given her everything.
What can she possibly get now?
Yeah, Joe.
Well, that's true. She does have everything.
I gave her like a sweet-ass engagement ring, then a sweet-ass wedding ring, and then a post-wedding ring, too. She has the Range Rover, she has the Lambo, the purple one. What else can I get her?
Bring her Santa.
I know where he lives. You do? He lives in Lapland, Finland. It's a fact.
So Bam decides for Christmas he's gonna find Santa and bring him back for Missy. Which it is kind of funny how it brings up that like the misconception is that Santa lives in the North Pole when he lives in Finland. Or maybe they just made that up for the movie. I didn't research it. And as you can tell, this whole thing is Viva La Bam, but it kind of leans more on fictionalized reality than Viva La Bam did. It still has that sitcom formatted as a reality show, but it's effectively jumping the shark here. And I'm not gonna lie, this new crew, they ain't doing it for me. They're just kind of sitting around hanging on Bam's every word. Joe France is okay, like I've actually listened to him in like interviews and on Radio Bam, and he's a funny guy, but he doesn't get to show this here. The only crew members who actually have something to contribute on screen with Bam are his brother Jess, who kind of just sits there grinning moronally, and Brandon Novak. And like Mark Hanna is Mark Hanna, but he does that laugh, and like that laugh was really funny and haggard when he did it once, but he like overdoes it here. And the rest, it's just like none of them are really entertaining or likable to pull off being in this. Like they're not replacing anybody from Viva La Bam. It just kind of feels like everybody is Casey from the last season of that 70s show. In that I don't care that they're there and I'm not watching it because of them. It starts off good enough because it has Bam and Novak interacting, and Bam is just like abusing him. Like Novak shows up with this shitbox car and explains that he bought it with no paperwork.
Nice Maserati out there.
Hey, dude, I just scored that thing for $400, man.
400 bucks?
First car I've ever owned in my life.
Did you even do paperwork, or did you just buy it flat out?
I just bought it.
You're an idiot. I bet it's a stolen car.
No, it's got keys. What do you mean?
Like these two have the back and forth. These two have it. The Bam and the rest of the crew do not. But then you start thinking, it's like, oh, this was after Bam's Unholy Union when, you know, Novak was pretty much clean, but then he got hurt on the show, and as a result, he had to get surgery, and he was on morphine, and he relapsed and like hit rock bottom worse than he ever had before. It's like the abuse is funny when you look at it at surface level, and then you look back at what I just said, and you're like, oh, Novak was a serious drug addict, and he was hanging around Bam, who was feeding his drug habit in order to abuse him. Like, it's funny, him wrecking the car is funny while Novak takes a dump. It's good filmmaking, but they don't even try to make it subtle. Bam is just literally abusing a drug addict. He even gives him a grocery list and puts heroin on it in big letters. And I want to iterate here, like, Novak's life was pretty dark early on when he first started coming around, and he did apparently actually start to kind of clean up for a while. But then after the Unholy Union injury, he sunk so low that he actually let a 45-year-old married man blow him for $20. So yeah, think about how dark of a place Novak was in during this period of time and how Bam continuously exploited him, and it's a lot less funny. But then if you can put it out of your head, it is kind of funny when Bam's just being a shithead.
I don't know why you're so worried, because it's just a little bit of spray paint. I mean, you could have a big windshield in.
Dude, this is the first thing that made my mother proud. My mother says you're actually moving up in this world.
She calls this moving up in the world.
But the problem is like, while it is funny, you can see that the humor is kind of just going a little too far down into mean-spirited territory. Like, all of a sudden, they're trying to stuff Novak into a gift box, they take his pants, and like, CKY was always mean-spirited, but it was individual actions. Here, it seems like Bam and his group of no-name lackeys are just going along with whatever Bam says and picking on a guy with severe substance abuse and mental health problems. The thing about CKY as a group is it never felt like it had a ringleader. Maybe Bam didn't like that so much, because here, all the guys with him just seem like they're his minions, and he's the ringleader. It makes me think, is this what Bam always wanted with the original crew? Because it wasn't like this in CKY or Jackass. In Viva La Bam, they tried to make Bam like this ringleader boss character, and all of his friends were just like these bums that follow him around and mooch off of him and live like his lavish lifestyle like secondhand. But anybody who actually watched the previous media knows that this is not the case. In fact, most of Bam's friends were actually just friends with his brother Jesse, and like then Bam started kind of hanging around too. Bam was always a tag-along kid. I think what bothers me the most about this is that, like, Bam tries to make himself out to be like he's Mo and his friends are the Three Stooges, and this is prevalent Finland in Viva La Bam. You could just tell that the guys in Viva La Bam were not very pleased with this arrangement. But this new crew of guys that he's hanging around with, they're just parasites, probably looking for a paycheck, so they follow his every move. It's always Bam just being like, we're here in Finland and we're gonna go do some shit. Let's go, team. And like they all just kind of follow him. Like I can't stand the new crew. This is why this didn't work, because none of them really have interesting personalities besides Novak. That's what made the rest of the CKY crew so good, is that they had their own personalities, they had their own little recurring gags and jokes, and they all acted a certain way that made them funny. Even Raikyon, who I really don't like that much, has his moments because he has a distinct look and he reacts to things a certain way. It's just, who greenlit this? I really hope Warner Bros. Didn't put like any money into this and that Bam just self-produced it and they distributed it. Because like, this is not good. So yeah, what we have here is an extended episode of Viva La Bam with none of the cast. It's shot like a Viva La Bam episode in every conceivable way. The montages, the editing, the fact that Bam and his friends are traveling to Finland. We get a Dudeson's appearance and him is there and there's more hijinks, but it also seems like just endless montages, and quite frankly, I stopped paying attention around here and started texting for like a good chunk of the movie and didn't feel like rewinding it. And the sad thing is, I had the same reaction when this first came out in 2008. I think my friend Andrew got it as a Christmas present, or like somebody gave him an HMV gift card and he decided to grab it when it was new. And when we hung out over the holidays, he threw it on and I just, for the life of me, could not get into it. I don't know why. I think maybe I was just kinda like done with the whole Jackass CKY phase, but like even still, like I could sit and watch like one episode of Viva La Bam casually, even when I was completely burned out on the franchise. I think the problem here was that this just did not have that it factor. The problem is, while Viva La Bam was banking off of Bam's popularity, CKY more or less presented all these guys who were funny, talented, or at least willing to hurt themselves for our entertainment. Sorry to go back to trashing on the new crew again, but they're like the main problem with this video. I love watching Dunn's sardonic response to everything. I enjoyed Deco's comedic stylings, and I liked watching Chris Rab shit. All that Where the Fuck is Santa does is prove that without either the CKY crew or the Jackass crew, Bam can't carry a video on his own. He needs his guys with him. Yeah, seeing Jimmy Pop and Ralph the Bagger screw around while Ralph is trying to pick up women is a little bit funny, but Ralph is not an appropriate fill-in for Don Vito. And he's also not good on camera like Rab. Like, they tried to replace Rab with Ralph the Bagger, but the difference is Rab was playing a person who was mentally challenged. Ralph was a person who was actually mentally challenged. Apparently in Minghags, and I assume this is the problem here, is they had to just like read his lines to them, start recording, and he'd repeat them. Nothing works here, and if you ever needed proof that CKY was about more than just Bam, here it is, because this video fucking stinks. I honestly think this was an attempt to maybe get a series of videos going through Warner Bros. That acted as like a spiritual successor to Viva La Bam and CKY, but it just didn't work, so Warner just concluded the business relationship and they never did another one again. I'll give it credit, like, you know, when it actually does manage to be funny, it's pretty funny, but for the most part, all I see here is the last-ditch effort of a franchise that had effectively run itself into the ground and was not a hot topic anymore. Remember when Bart says woozle wuzzle? That's pretty much like Where the Fuck is Santa, like, summed up. It's like, it's not funny anymore.
You're just finished, that's all.
It's telling that this was the last major Bam Margera project released besides Minghags, which had already sat on a shelf for 2 years at this point. I know next to nothing about the production notes on this one, like unlike Viva La Bam where you could kind of piece it together, this has almost like nothing. It did have most of the same crew as Viva La Bam, so I'm just assuming it is the exact same production ethic as Viva La Bam. I don't understand how this was allowed to happen, like how they were allowed to make like a CKY Viva La Bam thing that had nobody in it. And you know, I could be completely wrong that this was meant to be the first in a series of videos released through Warner Bros. That's all speculation. None of it really matters because at its core, Where the Fuck is Santa is just kind of a lame and sad way for a man who was once on top of the world to go out. The only thing it does right is it does capture a Christmassy feel and give a few cheap laughs. I gotta give it to Phil though for his small little appearance here. Phil actually managed to have the funniest part in the video because, you know, they're all building a giant gingerbread house with Jimmy Pop and like then they start picking at it and Phil tells them to stop picking at it, but then he starts picking at it and then blames them when April walks in. But besides like the cheap laughs, this is just way too end of the line for it to be worth even watching. You just know it's fucking over and that Bam basically couldn't get another project going after this. It's sad, but it's not the saddest moment in the franchise's history. In fact, maybe I jumped the gun a little bit saying this was like Bam's last shot because after Minghags was released, he actually had his last shot that wasn't like directly related to Jack. Jackass, and I will talk about that when I get to Ming Hags. So that was my brief look at Where the Fuck is Santa. Sorry I didn't have more to say about it, but it fucking sucked. I couldn't sit through it. I wish I had more to say about it, but really there wasn't a lot to say. There's only so many ways I could say this thing sucks. It's not like it's a big deviation from Viva La Bam in spirit. It is a Viva La Bam episode. It just doesn't have any of the cast members, but I don't think this would have been any good if it did have the cast members. I just think it was completely over for Bam. If you want to watch it yourself, it's on YouTube in full, and aside from a few funny moments, it stinks. Like, subscribe, Merry Christmas to those who celebrate, and Happy Holidays to the rest. Bye.
You better watch out, you better not cry, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. He's making a list, he's checking it twice, he's gonna find out who's a fucker.
And nobody's getting fucked.